Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
Today's show, we're excited to bring you new content as we head into the spring season. On this show, I'm going to share which pruners you need for various gardening chores you may encounter, and take a look at different pruning methods. We will also share an opportunity for young kids to get involved in the garden this spring and share details about a feature presentation to celebrate Black History Month. If you've ever been around a hairstylist or a chef, you know that the tools that they use for cutting are not just regular tools. And the same can be said for a gardener and their pruners. Now, you might not have given much thought to the pruners that you use, but we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the different styles that are available and look at two specific types of pruners in particular. When you're buying pruners, a lot of times they will say that they're either bypass pruners or Anvil style pruners, and that's an important feature to keep in mind. So bypass pruners are the everyday pruners that we often use. They're an important tool that many people just keep on their hip. I know I have a pair of them in my car, a pair in the garden shed, and then also a pair in my house, just because you never know where you're going to be and need them. So bypass pruners, they have their name because they're like your typical scissors in the fact that there is one sharp blade that comes down and bypasses the other blade, creating that scissor-like action, and it cuts branches in that regard. Now, the thing about bypass pruners is they're great for everyday use when we're trimming a lot of live, smaller tissue, green tissue that is easier to cut. They are not good for trimming larger wood or harder dead wood. A lot of times dead wood that has lost its moisture tends to be harder to cut. So for that, you're going to look for something called the Anvil style pruner. So unlike the bypass pruners where one blade is passing along next to it, the Anvil style pruners have a sharp blade that comes down onto or into a flat blade. So you can see how this blade actually nestles down into that piece of metal below. In some situations, it may be that it nestles into a piece of plastic that's flat, as we can see here. So this particular type of pruner is really good for larger, heavier, harder wood to prune. Now the thing about this is because you are actually sort of smashing the tissue when it cuts it, it's really not the best type of pruner to use on anything that you're cutting that's live tissue still. So again, for that you want to use your bypass pruners. So with bypass pruners, the problem is, and I do this too, I'm guilty of it, but sometimes you're out there in the garden and you want to use them on plant material that's a little bit too large for the size of pruners that you have. And what can happen is if you're trying to do that, because the blades bypass one another, there might be that twisting action that occurs, creating a gap in your pruners. So if you use that extensively on too large a material, you're going to have pruners that are ineffective because they're going to create a gap between those blades for you later on down the line. So sort of like those scissors that you might have back in your kitchen drawer somewhere that you found don't cut paper very well because they've been used on material that's too large. So that's a problem with the bypass pruners, but the Anvil style pruners, because they don't go next to each other, the blades don't bypass each other and they actually go down on it, they won't twist like that. Now the problem though is, if you can see here, what they do is actually smash the tissue. So if this was on a live plant, then you would be leaving some damaged tissue on that plant. So again, the biggest difference between the bypass pruners, those are going to be your everyday pruners for live plant tissue, whereas your anvil pruners are going to be the ones that you're using for your hard dead material. But they're an important pruner to also keep on hand. Now again, depending on the size of branches that you're trying to trim or prune back, you also want to consider getting different sizes. So they make anvil pruners that go even larger. So here's a set that is a little bit larger. And again, the longer the handles are, that's going to give you more leverage and also allow your reach to be a little bit longer as well. We have some even longer ones that again will give you even more leverage and more ability to cut larger plant material. A lot of times in the garden we're looking at pruning other plant material than just our woody plants, such as herbaceous plant material or softer tissue plants, such as herbs, and sometimes you might want to go out to the garden and do some cut flowers to bring into your home. And for that you want to look at using some snips, and these are like a smaller version of these large hand pruners. So these are a bypass blade system. You can see that they are similar in like scissors, that they have one blade that crosses over the other blade. So they're not going to really damage that plant tissue when you're trimming them. The other thing that's really nice about this is you're able to get in there and cut some of those fine stems. So again, minimal damage. Cutting some of those fine stems is important if you're doing cut flowers or herbs. So these are a nice version of snips. They come in different size types of blades, one that's curved and then also some that are straight. Both are handy depending on your preference. And there's also a lot of other options to consider when you're looking at pruners. So some of them you can see have like a ratcheting style. So if you have a hard time with your wrist and your grip, you can do something that has this ratcheting style where it will bite down on it. And you can see I've closed my hand all the way, but the blade is still open a little bit. And right in here it's got a ratcheting mechanism that allows you to open it back up and basically take another bite into that branch. Again, it hasn't cut through. It's going to allow me to open it back up. You hear it click, and then this final squeeze will make that cut for you and make a nice cut. So again, a lot of times there's that ratcheting system that you can look for. If you want to have more strength in your wrist, that's a nice feature. And another feature is one that's more ergonomic. This is one that the lower handle actually twists as you squeeze it. You can see right here, if you watch where the button is, it's down, but as I squeeze it, this lower handle actually pivots and rotates. So that's a little more of an ergonomic handle for you. And then another style is one that we found that our producer really likes, who has smaller hands. She likes to keep this on a dial that's set at 3. And when you open it up, you can see that it doesn't open very wide. If you rotate this to a higher number, such as 8, then it actually opens a lot wider. So if you have a smaller hand and you kind of don't like having to open your hand so wide every time, then you can regulate that opening with the dial on these pruners. So those are just a couple of features to consider when you're buying those pruners for this season. And I know as a gardener, you probably have more than one pair. And if you're ever looking at gifting a gardener with pruners, they're more than happy to get them because there are so many options available. Just like your mom might have yelled at you for using her fabric scissors on your craft paper, pruners also have a purpose in the garden, and you want to make sure that you're using them the way they're intended in order to have a successful season. It's that time of year when we're all starting to get a little antsy to get out in the garden, especially on these nice warm days. And really, we got a lot of cleanup to do. When we start cleaning up the garden, we often think about pruning and pruning our woody shrubs. There's a couple of things to keep in mind when you're looking and determining what to prune and when to prune it. And the big factor to consider is when that shrub might bloom. There are shrubs that bloom on what's called old wood, which is the wood from the previous season. And those flower buds start to develop last fall, and then they'll be blooming early this spring. Some examples of shrubs that bloom on old wood are forsythias, lilacs, and some hydrangeas. Now, some shrubs, such as crepe myrtles, this vitex behind us, and others will bloom on what's called new wood. So again, roses is another example of something that blooms on new wood. On these plants, you want to go ahead and prune them in late winter, early spring. So around that February, March time frame, you want to start pruning these. The flowers will develop on the new growth that comes out that spring. So we're going to go ahead and prune this back, get our shape back, and maintain the structure that we want underneath here, the architectural structure of this plant. You can see we've got a lot of suckering that's happening. We want to sort of maintain that tree form. Now, there's a couple of different ways of doing this, and one is to go ahead and, if you wanted to control the height of it, because these can get a little unruly like crepe myrtles, if you want to control it, we could cut it all the way back to the ground. Also, if it ever has disease or infection of insects or something like that, that's a good way to kind of, again, just renew that plant. Now, for this particular one, what we're going to do, though, is go ahead and keep some of these older branches, but you can see a lot of these suckers coming from the crown. We're going to go ahead and remove those, and that's sort of a thinning method in the fact that we're going to open up this canopy and allow for better air circulation. Now, as I got in here, there is one branch, this particular branch here. It looks like a large branch, one that we would want to keep, but upon closer inspection, it has a crack that pretty much goes about the length of 12 inches down the side of this. And that's only going to potentially open up disease and decay inside of this branch, which could affect the overall plant. So while this is a larger branch, we're going to go ahead and remove it. And anytime you remove a larger portion, you want to remove that area first, just so that we can see how much total material we're going to be removing from the plant. So now that we've removed that larger branch, you can see we've lost a fair amount on this right side of the canopy. We're going to go ahead and leave this one. We're going to leave this one. And we're going to remove this actual other one that's fairly significant, just because it faces directly into this larger shrub behind us. We will leave this smaller one for the time being, just to help fill in the space on the right here. But the other suckers we're going to remove, and then we're going to work on limbing this up a little bit more. When you're thinning as a form of pruning, you're making diligent cuts, and you're making important cuts in order to improve the overall canopy of the plant. In some plants, you're going to prune out the old growth, and in some plants, you're going to prune out the new growth. Now, something to also keep in mind is in some cases you have water sprouts, and these are often just the tall, straight, thin branches that grow. And the more I look at this, the more I don't like this whole branch either. So I'm actually going to remove this back to here. And that's the thing about pruning, is there's not one right way to do it. It's important to step back away from that tree, evaluate it, and look at it overall, and then come back in and prune again. The worst thing that you can do is get in here and be so focused and cut, and then all of a sudden you step back and you've kind of really taken off too much. So again, make those diligent cuts, step back, take a look. You can always cut more as you go through that process, but it's really hard to reattach any of those branches successfully. So after looking upon this, again, I'm going to go ahead and remove this interior branch further. So in this particular method, when we were thinning, a lot of times we were either taking the branch back to the ground, or we were going in and trimming back to another branch or another bud in order to redirect that growth outward. Now, another method of pruning is called heading, where you would really just take something and make a blunt cut. We did some of that on our vitex behind us when we went to the ground. But on this spirea, again, this is another form of rejuvenative pruning. A lot of times spireas will continue to grow. They're going to grow out from this older growth and be just fine. But it's another way of controlling the growth of it. So we're going to take this all the way back to the ground. So I've got some shears that we're just going to cut this back. A lot of times this is done in fruit trees, especially when you buy a new fruit whip that might be 5 feet tall. You're going to head that back to about 18 inches in order to break those buds right there at that 18-inch height to develop that canopy. So there's a couple of different reasons why you might use that heading method. It's probably not the most common as thinning is. So you can see with this type of pruning, we've gone back and just really taken some blunt cuts, indiscriminately taking these stems all the way back to the ground or to the crown. Unlike the thinning method that we did behind us, where we were selectively pruning back to a branch or another bud to redirect that growth, we're just not really paying attention to the buds that are going to be shooting out, because we're basically rejuvenating this plant. It's going to flush out all new growth. And we're going to have a nice shrub this spring. Now this is a spirea, and so this is a method that you can do. If we didn't prune it, if you didn't have time or you didn't get around to it, this will regrow, but it's going to get a little bit leggier and larger. So this is again a way of maintaining that habit. So that's what we're going to do on these, and we're going to go back and head all of these back. We're back here in our keyhole garden, and it's been a few years since we've been in here and visited it with you guys. We wanted to kind of showcase it and tell you what's been going on. A couple of years ago, we planted some perennials in here, including just a couple of Helene von Stein lamb's ears, and you can see how they have taken off. They've really enjoyed the soil that they're growing in here. And of course, we've still got some Mexican feathergrass as well. So at this point, we're kind of looking at this lamb's ear and we need to do something about it. It's kind of taken over. So I wanted to share with you what you might do if you have a situation where you've got some perennials and you're looking at cutting them back, getting them ready for the spring. And what you're going to do is just take a couple of hand pruners, or whatever kind of pruners or scissors you might have for landscaping. And we're going to go in here and just start chopping some of this old growth back. When you get in here, you can see how there are these older canes, and a lot of this is just old growth up here. But if you go down into it where it's been warmer over the winter time, you can see there's new growth coming on. So we're just going to trim back to where that new growth is, and that'll allow fresh new growth to come out this spring. After you get a lot of the bigger stuff taken out, what you're going to do is just rake out some of those leaves and clean it up a little bit more. And you can see that the plant itself is not actually as big as what it first appeared. So I think originally we planted about 5 lamb's ear, and you can see that this was one plant, but as it grows and the stems fall to the ground, they tend to root themselves. In fact, you can see how there are roots on some of these. And so a lot of this is just babies off of this main plant. Now we're going to go ahead and leave this one, but I think this plant up here in the foreground, we're going to go ahead and remove it. So when we dig it up, there's a lot of plants that can be made from this. And really, you're just going to try to get into the outside of the plant. Lamb's ear is a pretty tough perennial, so you don't have to be too cautious. You're definitely going to be dividing some of this up. Again, there you can see the roots, how those have grown, and that's over the rocks there. So we're just going to go in here with our shovel and start digging. All right, as you dig it up, you can see we've got a good clump here with a good amount of root system on it. But this is actually a really large plant, and as I was digging, it actually divided itself. You can see here's another plant here. And again, we're just going to pull some of those roots. But even this can be divided further and actually wants to. You can do this with your hands. A lot of times they'll just tease apart that way. Or you can go in with your shovel on something larger like this and actually use your shovel blade to cut it in half and divide those roots, because they can be quite coarse. So out of that one plant, you can see that we were able to multiply it and get 4 new plants to add to our garden. Joining us next is Dr. Doug Needham, who is a former horticulture professor here at OSU. Now in his retired days, he's still working with horticulture through Seed Your Future. He's joining us to tell us about a contest opportunity for young kids to get them involved in gardening.
Hi, I'm Doug Needham, retired Vice President of Education at Longwood Gardens, former Professor of Floriculture at Oklahoma State University, and one of the founding partners of Seed Your Future, a national initiative. It's a coalition of over 200 partners, including horticulture companies, gardening organizations, schools, colleges, universities, including Oklahoma State University, nonprofit organizations, youth organizations, and individuals. We are united with Seed Your Future's mission to promote horticulture and inspire people to pursue careers working with plants. I'm excited to share with you today some of the Seed Your Future's newest initiatives for 2021, the Year of Plant Power. Youth have told us that they want to help solve some of the world's greatest challenges today. And we have positioned Seed Your Future and our Bloom campaign to provide the tools that teachers, parents, and students need to learn about global issues such as global hunger, flooding, air pollution, noise pollution, food deserts, and more. With the current national focus on educating students during a global pandemic, Seed Your Future, in partnership with Scholastic, is excited to announce the 2021 Bloom campaign, Plants to the Rescue, and for the 4th year, our Plant Mashup contest for students in grades 6 through 8. This year's contest takes learning a step further and engages students in imagining a plant hybrid with unique capabilities to solve some of the problems that the students are seeing in their very own communities. Winning entries are eligible for amazing prizes, including a $500 Visa gift card for the winning student and a $1,500 Visa gift card for the student's teacher or submitting parent. Visit the Bloom online educator website at scholastic.com/bloom for online learning modules, teaching resources, posters, and of course, the contest entry form. In addition to the Bloom educator website and the wearebloom.org youth-centered website, our main seedyourfuture.org website is a digital hub for all things horticulture, including real-life stories, careers in horticulture, places to study horticulture, scholarships, internships, plant DIY video projects, and more. It's Seed Your Future's premise that whether Bloom introduces youth to a lifelong passion for plants or to a fulfilling career in horticulture, one thing is clear: the more we know about plants, the more we can make a difference in the world today. Contest entries are due March 1st, 2021, so get started on your entry today.
In celebration of Black History Month, Oklahoma Gardening is partnering with Langston University to bring to you a feature presentation that we're going to premiere on our social media Thursday, February 18th. Mike Anderson, who is a horticulture educator for Langston University, joins us as he portrays his father, L.A. Anderson, as he became a farmer in Haskell, Oklahoma in the 1940s. It's a unique look at the struggles and perseverance of a black farmer in the 1940s in Haskell, Oklahoma. Join us this Thursday, February 18th at 9 a.m. on our Facebook as this video premieres. As always, you can also find it on our YouTube channel.
When I got to the Haskell area, I met my wife, Rosalie Anderson, and her dad was a farmer, and he mentored me and helped me become a farmer. And me and my wife decided that we was going to be farmers, and that's what we really struck out to be. We put our passion, it was our passion.
Join us next week as we continue to look at different methods of pruning, including one method that will allow you to grow a fruit tree in the narrowest of places. And although it's freezing outside, our microgreens are still growing, and there's plenty to do to get ready for the upcoming gardening season.
To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We would like to thank our generous underwriter, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is also provided by Pond Pro Shop, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Oklahoma Horticultural Society, and the Tulsa Garden Club.